What if this wasn't just another coaching hire, but a cultural flashpoint that exposed everything wrong with how the NFL handles young talent? Because that's exactly what just happened in Atlanta. Cam Newton didn't simply criticize the Falcons. He detonated the conversation. No filters, no PR-friendly language, just raw frustration aimed straight at ownership for bringing in Kevin Stefanski as the new head coach. And the reason this moment is blowing up isn't about playbooks or schemes. It's about trust, history, and the message this hire sends to an entire generation of players. Within hours, social media lit up. Fans weren't just debating wins and losses. They were questioning motives. They were revisiting what happened in Cleveland with Shadyer Sanders. And they were asking the one question nobody in the Falcons front office wants to answer publicly. How do you hand a young, culturally influential roster to a coach whose past is already under heavy scrutiny? Cam Newton made it clear this wasn't random outrage. He framed Atlanta as more than a football market. This is a city with identity, influence, cultural weight, a place where players aren't just athletes, they're symbols. And in his eyes, hearing Stefanski felt like ignoring that reality entirely. Not adapting, not learning, just repeating the same cycle and hopping fans won't notice. That's why this story hit harder than a normal offseason headline. Because Cam didn't just call out the Falcons, he called out a pattern where young quarterbacks struggle to get real development, where blame gets shifted to players instead of systems, where opportunity feels selective instead of earned. And once that conversation started, it couldn't be put back in the box. Now Atlanta is under a microscope. Every decision will be judged through this lens. Every quarterback rep will be analyzed. Every setback will reopen this debate. And whether the Falcons like it or not, this hire just became one of the most polarizing moves of the offseason. Because this isn't about whether Kevin Stefanski can draw up plays. It's about whether Atlanta just tied its future to the very problems Cam Newton says the league keeps refusing to fix. And once you understand what Cam is really saying, the controversy suddenly makes a lot more sense. Cam Newton didn't start this conversation lightly. He went straight to the heart of the issue by pointing at what happened in Cleveland and using Shadyer Sanders as the example everyone could understand. In Cam's eyes, that situation wasn't a one-off mistake. It was proof of a deeper problem. He argued that Shadyer never received consistent opportunity, never had a clear developmental runway, and was constantly placed in unstable situations where growth became almost impossible. What made this hit harder is that Shadyer wasn't an unknown project. He came into the league with elite preparation, football IQ, and a lifetime of exposure to high-level systems. Cam emphasized that this wasn't about talent. It was about environment. When young quarterbacks don't feel trusted, don't get continuity, and don't receive clear support, their confidence erodes fast. And once that happens, performance usually follows. Then Cam took it further. He warned fans not to fall for the narrative shift that often happens later. The version where organizations quietly blame the player, where headlines say the quarterback didn't fit the system or failed to execute. According to Cam, that framing ignores the bigger truth. Systems are supposed to adapt to talent. Coaches are supposed to develop players, not cycle through them. That's why this hire felt dangerous to him, because Atlanta isn't rebuilding from the ground up. They already have young talent in place, a roster full of players who need stability, patience, and long-term vision. And in Cam's mind, bringing in a coach tied to development questions risks repeating the same cycle all over again. But that wasn't the only concern he raised, because once he started looking at Atlanta's roster, the warning became even louder. When Cam shifted the focus to Atlanta's roster, the tone changed from criticism to alarm, because this isn't a team starting from zero. This is a young core already stacked with upside. Michael Penix at quarterback, Drake London on the outside, Kyle Pitts in the middle, Bijan Robinson in the backfield. Cam called it a rare situation where a coach walks into something that's already built to compete. The foundation is there, the tools are there, the opportunity is there. And that's exactly why this hire bothered him so much. From Cam's perspective, this roster doesn't need to be torn apart and rebuilt. It needs to be developed. It needs structure. It needs leadership that knows how to nurture young talent instead of constantly hitting the reset button. He made it clear that the Falcons aren't lacking ability. What they're risking is direction. Cam framed it like this: inheriting talent is easy. Elevating talent is the hard part. Anyone can step into a room full of gifted players. The real test is whether those players become better versions of themselves year after year. That's where his doubt about Stefanski came in. He questioned whether Atlanta is setting these young stars up for growth or setting them up for frustration. Because when a roster this young doesn't see progress, morale drops fast, confidence fades, and suddenly a promising situation turns into another rebuild cycle. That's when Cam dropped the bigger point. Atlanta isn't just betting on a coach. They're betting the future of their young core. Every snap Penix takes, every route London runs, every season Pitts and Bijan spend in their prime, all of that is now tied to one decision. And that's where the pressure really starts, because once Cam brought numbers into the conversation, things got even more uncomfortable. That's when Cam stopped talking feelings and started talking facts, because opinions can be debated, but numbers don't lie. He pointed out that over the last 2 seasons, Kevin Stefanski's record was actually worse than the coach Atlanta just let go. Let that sink in. The Falcons fired their head coach for underperforming, and then replaced him with someone whose recent results were statistically weaker. From Cam's perspective, that alone should have triggered serious questions inside the front office. If accountability is the standard, why does it suddenly disappear when a familiar name is available? But the stat that really hit like a punch to the chest was this one: 13 quarterbacks. 13 different signal callers cycled through Cleveland under Stefanski. 13 chances to develop a franchise leader, and not one clear success story came out of it. Cam didn't frame this as bad luck. He framed it as instability. Because when a system burns through quarterbacks that fast, development becomes almost impossible. Chemistry never settles. Confidence never builds. And the most important position in football turns into a revolving door. He made the point simple. Franchise quarterbacks don't grow in chaos. They grow in structure. They grow with consistency. They grow when a coaching staff commits to them instead of constantly shifting direction. And that's why this stat mattered so much. It wasn't about one prospect failing. It wasn't about one bad season. It was about a pattern repeating itself over and over again. Cam basically said it without saying it. At some point, you stop blaming the players and start questioning the system. When the same results keep happening with different quarterbacks, the common denominator becomes impossible to ignore. And once he laid that foundation, he went even further, tearing apart the one argument Stefanski's supporters always used to defend him. And that's when Cam dismantled the biggest shield Stefanski's defenders love to hide behind: that old playoff run in Cleveland. You've heard it before. He took them to the postseason. He turned the franchise around. He proved he can win. Cam wasn't buying any of it. He called it selective memory. According to Cam, when you actually look at that Cleveland roster during that run, the talent was stacked. Strong defense, multiple playmakers, favorable matchups. The situation was built to succeed, and in his eyes, that success didn't come because of elite coaching, it happened despite it. What matters more is what came after. Instead of growth, there was regression. Instead of stability, there was turnover. Instead of development, there was stagnation. Quarterbacks came in with promise and left with shaken confidence. Systems kept changing, roles kept shifting, and the offense never found a true identity. Cam's point was clear. If that playoff appearance was proof of coaching brilliance, the seasons that followed should have shown momentum. Instead, they showed collapse. That's what bothered him most about Atlanta's decision. The front office didn't evaluate the full timeline. They focused on one highlight moment and ignored the downward trend that followed it. And here, where Cam got even more blunt. He reminded people this wasn't a new take. He's been critical of Stefanski's coaching approach for years. When Cleveland finally moved on, Cam publicly supported it. He believed the experiment had already gone on too long. From his perspective, the sample size is massive. Enough games, enough quarterbacks, enough seasons, enough evidence. And once you reach that point, the benefit of the doubt disappears. Because in today's NFL, quarterback development isn't optional. It's not a bonus skill. It's the job. If you can't consistently evaluate, nurture, and elevate talent at the most important position in sports, then what exactly are you offering? That question sat heavy, and it led Cam directly into his biggest concern yet, what this hire actually says about Atlanta's priorities. This is where Cam shifted from criticizing one coach to challenging the entire Falcons organization. Because in his eyes, Atlanta didn't just hire Kevin Stefanski. They made a statement about what they value, a statement about what they're willing to overlook, and a statement about who they're trusting with the future of a young roster. Cam reminded everyone that this Falcons team isn't broken. It's loaded with potential. Michael Penix at quarterback, Drake London on the outside, Kyle Pitts down the seam, Bijan Robinson in the backfield. This isn't a rebuild from the ground up. This is a team that's already sitting on raw talent, waiting to be unlocked. And that's exactly why this hire confused him. You don't bring in a coach with a shaky development track record when your roster is built around youth. You bring in someone known for growth, communication, and adaptability. Someone who can build confidence, not manage chaos. Cam made it clear this isn't about scheme. It's not about playbooks. It's about leadership style, about whether players feel empowered or restricted, about whether young quarterbacks feel supported or constantly judged. And that's where the Shedeur Sanders comparison came back into the spotlight. Cam warned that if Atlanta repeats the same approach Cleveland used, short leashes, unclear roles, inconsistent opportunity, then history is going to repeat itself. New city, same outcome. That's what scares him. Because when a franchise chooses familiarity over accountability, comfort over results, and reputation over recent performance, it usually leads to the same ending: frustrated players, stalled growth, and another reset nobody asked for. And now, according to Cam, Atlanta doesn't get to hide from that pressure. Every snap will be watched. Every quarterback rep will be dissected. Every sign of stagnation will circle back to this exact moment. And that's where the stakes officially changed. Now here, where Cam Newton's message really started to hit hard: accountability. Because Cam wasn't just calling out Kevin Stefanski, he was calling out the Falcons' front office for signing off on this move in the first place. He pointed out something that fans immediately latched onto. If Atlanta fired their previous coach for underperforming, how does it make sense to replace him with someone whose recent record is even worse? That's not progress. That's lateral movement at best and regression at worst. Cam made it clear that numbers don't lie. Over the last 2 seasons, Stefanski's team struggled. Offensive rankings dropped. Quarterback instability grew. Wins became harder to come by. And yet somehow, this resume still convinced ownership that he deserved another shot with a young roster that needs direction more than excuses. That's when Cam delivered one of his strongest points. When a coach cycles through quarterback after quarterback without developing a clear franchise leader, the blame eventually shifts. It stops being about bad luck. It stops being about injuries. It stops being about fit. At some point, the system itself becomes the problem. And Cam said Atlanta should have asked that question before signing the contract. Because Penix isn't just another name on the depth chart. He's the future. And when you hand the future to someone with a history of burning through quarterbacks, you're gambling with years of development. That's why Cam framed this as more than a bad hire. To him, this was a warning sign, a moment that revealed whether Atlanta is serious about building something sustainable or comfortable repeating the same cycle and hopping fans stay patient. And the scary part, according to Cam, this decision doesn't get judged later, it gets judged immediately. Because the clock starts now. And that's the part Cam Newton wanted everyone to understand. This isn't just about Kevin Stefanski. This is about what Atlanta chooses to represent moving forward. Because coaching hires aren't just football decisions anymore, they're culture statements. They signal who gets protected, who gets developed, and whose voices actually matter inside the building. And right now, Cam believes the Falcons sent the wrong message at the worst possible time. Atlanta is sitting on a young, talented core. The opportunity is real. The window is open. But windows close fast when leadership fails to evolve. If this hire leads to stalled quarterback growth, locker room tension, or another wasted season, this moment will be replayed over and over again as the turning point. That's why the pressure isn't just on Stefanski. It's on ownership, it's on the front office, it's on every decision that follows. Because now the spotlight is on Atlanta in a way it hasn't been before. Fans are watching, players are watching, and the rest of the league is watching to see if this franchise learns from history or repeats it. So now it's your turn. Do you agree with Cam Newton's take? Is this hire a smart reset or a dangerous gamble with the future? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, subscribe for more real breakdowns, and stay locked in, because this story is just getting started.